Well, good afternoon to everyone. Welcome back to Let's Talk Clots on World Thrombosis Day. We hope you've enjoyed our sessions so far and are really delighted to welcome this sponsored symposium by ThinkSono. So we are welcoming Fouad Al-Noor, who was the co-founder and chief exec at ThinkSono, who's going to share an update on DVT detection with AI. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Joe. Yes, as Joe suggested, I'm the CEO of ThinkSono, and we've been working actually on this technology for 5 years. So we're quite excited at the progress we did. For some of you, you might have attended the previous session at Let's Talk Clots, and we actually went quite far since then. We've managed to publish a paper in Nature Digital Medicine, which actually goes through some of the let's call it initial clinical evidence or preclinical evidence that we have about the detection of deep vein thrombosis, specifically proximal deep vein thrombosis with artificial intelligence. So I'll go through maybe some background. In particular, this audience might be already experts in this, and I made this sort of very overarching thing about DVT. And as we all know, it's a huge worldwide problem. It's considered the #1 cause of preventable hospital death. And here it's actually more for lay people where I say DVT related deaths. And of course, it's venous thromboembolism, which we're talking about when it comes to the number of deaths. But obviously, we want to detect DVT as fast as possible and as convenient and cost effectively as possible. The main thing we've actually managed to do, and I'll go into why these two products sort of make sense and why I'm discussing them in a second, because it's related to the clinical study we're running. But what we've built are 2 different products, which is an app, literally an Android app. You can download it on your phone. It's currently not available because we're still in investigational device and we're running studies with them. But the idea would be you download our AutoDVT app or ThinkSono AI app on your phone. And if you have a compatible handheld device, ultrasound device like the one shown here with Clarius, you're able to perform a compression ultrasound scan to detect deep vein thrombosis. And we also have provided what we call the cloud dashboard. What that means is that the images can go for radiology review if required as well. And that also matters because, as I'm sure the discussion will go about who takes responsibility and reimbursements, and there's many, many things to discuss. So we've tried to be, let's say, as compatible with different healthcare systems as possible. So in particular, what I really was excited to show you now is really just get to the point of just how the technology works, particularly since last time I didn't really get to show too much of the technology. So the idea in this case, it's actually one of my colleagues' leg is being scanned to detect for DVT, and you'll see more or less how this new technology powered by AI works on detecting proximal DVT. So you download an app on your phone and you have one of these handheld devices, and what you'll see in a second is a compression ultrasound being carried out. So initially, my colleague, he just will write down some details on it, for example, a patient, and you're able to set date of birth, height, and weight, and that actually optimizes the system to detect DVT depending on the person's BMI. And in fact, this is pretty much the exact software we'll currently be running a multi-centered clinical study on to measure sensitivity and specificity, but I'll go into that in a second. So you put some height and weight, and what you'll see in a second is a compression ultrasound protocol, which is this one. So this is what a radiologist would more or less do if they want to detect DVT using ultrasound. So you're looking at the saphenofemoral junction, the common femoral vein, and then popliteal vein twice, actually. The reason we actually do the popliteal scan twice with ultrasound is because if the software makes a mistake the first time, the second time it should catch the clot. It's just statistically, it's just less likely to get it wrong twice than one time. And we also have an optional point, which we currently don't include in our study, which is a thigh point. So in detection of deep vein thrombosis, usually you do say proximal DVT, so down to the knee, and some people like to add some compressions in the thigh. And for those that perhaps don't know too much about the ultrasound side of diagnosis, DVT is diagnosed via compression ultrasound. So you push on the vein and you look to see if there is any incompressibility. So if I go back there for a second, this is designed actually for a user who's never seen ultrasound before, right? So there's very basic training we provide, like a nurse can use this technology as an example, or someone who doesn't have ultrasound experience. Here we also display a very sort of basic illustration of roughly where to place this handheld probe that we also provide. And then it says here, the exam starts in the groin region, position the patient and probe as shown in the picture above. And it's just for reference. Usually in our experience, users know how to do it very, very easily. And here it says scanning, we call it groin, again, just using slightly more lay language, 1 out of 2. And this would be looking for, say, the common femoral vein and artery. And so if you're a non-ultrasound expert, you'll now start to see guidance. So this is really the AI taking off. So what it's detecting there is in red, the arteries, and then in sort of green hue is the vein. And soon the AI, and in fact, you can turn this on and off as well, but what the AI is trying to show is this user how to perform a compression ultrasound for DVT. And in a second, it will literally tell them when to compress. And that is based on the correct anatomical landmarks in the leg, which goes in a second there. So it even makes a sound that says recommended area for compression. This is quite important because we want to compress in the specific anatomical landmarks to make sure there's no thrombus in that area. So in a second, you'll see a compression being carried out, which means that this sort of greenish goes away and that you can see the vessel walls touching there. And what the software is also doing, it's recording this clip because it's going to analyze it in a second. So there we go. Here it says auto DVT analyzing the compression. And in a second, in the background, it's already deciding in a second whether or not that's a successful compression. In other words, whether or not there's a DVT in that area in the leg. And then in a second, it will ask the user, sorry, I keep having to go back and forth. It will in a second ask the user what they think, basically. That's actually quite important because what it's doing, it acts like a reality check. If the user disagrees, it will ask the user to retry unless they want to really override the system. You'll see that in a second now. So there it's analyzing. And it's done. And it says, are the veins fully compressible? Again, the AI has actually made its own decision. And then it gets like a final confirmation from the user what they think. And we specifically don't show what the AI has decided. We don't want to bias the user. In this case, obviously, it's compressible and the user will say compressible, and then it will move on to the next compression point there. And so now my colleague is scanning the second sort of compression point in his leg. Is slightly more distal than the other one. Again, just following the standard compression ultrasound scan. And by having this ability to get notifications when to compress, highlightings of veins and arteries, recording the compression and analyzing the compression, at least it's our belief that it's much easier to perform a DVT scan when you don't have ultrasound experience. And then I actually showed earlier as well that you can upload this to the cloud and have that reviewed by a radiologist if required, but it may avoid the patient having to be seen by the specialist. For example, the specialist can review it at home instead of scanning it themselves. A compression will be done in the popliteal area now in a second. And again, same as before, but this is in the knee area. And you saw earlier that picture showing the knee area. Again, you're getting real-time guidance, and then in a second, there'll be another compression carried out. In this particular video, as you can see, we did this actually on purpose to show the point that if you do a compression, but you're outside the field of view, that could be dangerous. So this is, if you're a sonographer on the school, you might say, well, you know, this is a bit dangerous because I can't see the vessel compressing. You could miss a thrombus there. We actually took that into account in the software. So in a second, the software is analyzing this and saying, actually, I'm not sure. You should probably retry because the vessels are not centered in the image. Again, this really helps. So you can see that there, retry is recommended. Try to keep the vessels in the center of the image. And then you can retry that scan. That's what's recommended there. Again, this makes sure that the sensitivity and specificity of detecting DVT is hopefully as high as a sonographer would have it. So then, of course, it gets repeated, and then the scans get carried out, just to skip some of this because it's somewhat repetitive. Now the user can continue as long as once they're done with all the correct compression points. This can take as little as 15 minutes actually to carry out on a patient. They click finalize exam, and then essentially that's your DVT exam completed, and you should have more or less a diagnosis at this stage. And this diagnosis can be confirmed. And I will discuss in a second why this matters, and what we're doing next actually to validate that this scan that's carried out by these non-radiologists, it's safe, and why it matters a lot for patients and the healthcare system in general. So actually here at the top, as I'm sure everyone knows, the current clinical pathway is relatively long. It can take 6 to 24 hours to get diagnosed. It involves several touch points, including a D-dimer blood test. And then you do have that ultrasound specialist there carrying out the scan, and then you have a report. In our case, this can be seriously simplified. So for example, a patient can walk in. In fact, they can be in primary care if they really want to at their GP practice. But in any case, if they walk into A&E, they can also get scanned at that stage. And then of course you have the assessment, which I just showed, and then you get a report immediately, which can then also be confirmed and validated via a remote radiologist if required. And that's quite important because depending on the strength of the clinical evidence we'll be carrying out with Oxford University Hospital, we hope that at least in the future that you don't even need a confirmation at the end. But this obviously has huge implications for patients because the clinical pathways is made much shorter. You can avoid potentially prophylaxis if you send the patient home with prophylaxis and you don't want to do that. At night time, when a patient comes in and ultrasound's not available, you can carry it out. You can also avoid the need for the patient to have to go long distances if sonographers aren't available where they are. So in general, the number of improvements is not only for the patient, but also for the healthcare system in terms of cost savings, time savings, and resource savings for the NHS as an example, but obviously across the world. The way we're actually validating this entire system is by a paper we published in Nature recently, which showed sensitivity above 90% and specificity above 80%, I believe. And I can send around a link for that, and you'll have access to it. If you just search DVT AI, you'll even see that on Google actually. But what we're doing next is doing a multi-centered study with Oxford, Sheffield, St. George's, and perhaps Leicester, in fact, as well, and several other institutions in Germany as well as in the UK, where they want to deploy our system, essentially run a pilot, and then make sure that the benefits outweigh the disadvantages, i.e. It's as good as the current standard of care. That's what we were really aiming for. And here are just some examples of the institutions we're working with. We're also funded by the Wellcome Trust, actually, which is quite exciting for us. And we're working with Clarius as one of our ultrasound vendors. Currently, the software is available to use in terms of data collection and storage, but as I mentioned, we can't yet use it for diagnosis, mainly because we want to finish our clinical studies first before we can make any sort of diagnostic claims. But you can technically use it as a sort of data collection and storage device. And so I can discuss that for those that are interested. And here are just some basic idea about our team and who we are. So we have, for example, Professor Bernard Kynes and Professor Matthias and Dr. Ramin as our advisors. And Dr. Nicola Curry is actually not shown on here, but she's one of our big supporters who are running our clinical studies with Oxford. So I guess there's a lot to say, I know. So I'm happy to take questions and just have a broad discussion about what the community thinks about what you've seen already, about the potential improvements, and indeed where they think this technology can go in the future. And it's definitely, I suppose, quite a difference between what we showed this round relative to what we did last time. So I'm happy to take any questions that you guys might have.
Thank you, Fouad. That was really interesting. And just to remind the audience, if you have questions, if you can type them into the chat or the Q&A tools, that would be really helpful so we can see and then quickly address them. Something I was interested, obviously where you've been working at the moment in Oxford, was very much training involved in staff who weren't the radiologist in using the device.
That is exactly the users we're going for. So if you're already trained, you don't need the technology. You can just do the scan yourself and you're already qualified. The idea is to have these non-trained staff. In fact, most staff aren't trained in ultrasound. Very few staff, usually just sonographers and radiologists are trained to do this. And some emergency doctors are trained for other scans, usually not DVT scans. So it really applies across the board. But the most useful for those that aren't trained in ultrasound is the most useful technology. And it also opens up sonography and radiology time as well, because they're quite busy. So they might not necessarily wish to do these DVT scans. For example, at Oxford, for example, you could take that as a use case where they have a DVT clinic, but they also have to have sonographers coming from radiology or some other parts of like you have to involve other departments essentially to go for a very specific diagnosis and treatment. So in this case, you don't have to do that necessarily. You can do everything in one place. And that's obviously a big deal.
You've obviously been doing some trials, and you mentioned then a multi-centre trial, I think with Sheffield, Leicester, Oxford and St George's.
Indeed.
Is there opportunity for others to become involved in any way? Or?
Yes, if you reach out to me, we are actually talking to, in fact, Leicester was joining later down the line. And in fact, it's quite interesting. And they reached out through the previous talk I gave, and that's how we included them in the study. So if anyone else wants to join this study or indeed set up a different study, there are many things we want to explore, like usability would be another thing. There are other people interested, for example, in pregnant women, focusing on that. We're not including that in the current study. So there are many aspects of this technology that can get tested in different ways in slightly different settings. Primary care is an example, which we're not doing much in primary care at this stage. So you can see how this really starts to expand and people get really excited. So yeah, just feel free to reach out to me.
Thank you. And for the groups that are already on board, when do you think this will start, and what's the length of time that the study will be running for?
We hope we've got ethics approval, everything's set up. Now we're doing that final sort of pieces of making sure that the way the data flows in the study is robust and there's there's no errors with the data we collect. So we're all confident about it, but we hope to start recruitment very soon in that. Perhaps even as early as next month, I hope. But we're working on it to get started as soon as possible. But otherwise, we're pretty much ready to go to start recruitment.
And to start up, so if the centre came on board, is there very much cost involved for them in joining or trialling?
We actually support in terms of sponsorship. So if they can't take on any costs themselves, it's a discussion to be had how much, but we can support them as well. So in fact, some of the later sites that joined would perhaps need some support in terms of financial support, and we could support that as well. It's a discussion to be had with each individual site. It just depends how much it costs. Usually it doesn't cost a huge amount actually, because the resources is quite low. They obviously don't have to write the protocol or anything like that. That's all set up. We would just add them as an additional site. And so we're really talking about some additional staff to do the scans. And they don't even have to do a huge number of scans because we have already some sites available anyway. So it's more like whatever they can helps us, because it just speeds up recruitment. So usually it's not a huge amount of cost.
Okay, really interesting. I mean, as you say, where this can go is phenomenal. And you mentioned, I know that trial isn't taking place at the moment, but that potential for pregnant women. Is there anything that's safer in this than the scans that they would otherwise undertake if a DVT was suspected?
I don't know if it's safe because it's also ultrasound. So I'm not sure safe. Well, the thing is, we have to really explore this because it's in my opinion, underexplored area. For example, we know they're more at risk than, say, non-pregnant women. And there is a potential to do cost effectively more frequent scanning, for example. So there might be a possibility where because of the, let's say, ease of use of the technology, you increase the number of scans and therefore you catch clots earlier or clots you wouldn't catch otherwise. But that statement isn't validated yet in studies. That's literally why we have to do the studies, to see if that's the case. At the very minimum, I'll say it's more convenient and probably less expensive. I could even imagine like a midwife, let's say, scanning the patient at home instead of the patient going into hospital. So there are other reasons why this would be better for the patient, other than like strictly safety. It could just be convenience. Yeah.
I mean, ease of access is definitely
huge.
there, isn't it? Yeah. And in the work you're doing at the moment, is it cost effective scanning appropriate patients, obviously in this way, rather than in the traditional current manner?
Yeah, it is. So what we, in the Nature paper we published, we actually worked with Sheffield on this as well. So they did an entire health economic analysis on the current clinical pathway and different ways you can use it. I believe there are like 6 different ways you can sort of integrate it, perhaps even more. Just we did it relatively comprehensively. And yes, it's very cost effective. I think we can potentially charge the NHS £150 per scan, which is actually quite a lot, because if you really extend it, you can save on D-dimer, you can save on time, and you can save on the radiologist scanning. And so you add that together. Never mind the cost for the patient, by the way, because that's also something not even taken into account necessarily in the calculation. But it's significantly more cost effective than the scans carried out now. At least that's what the analysis we published shows. And of course, everyone's can go and have a look at that, and you can see how the modeling was done there. So we're very confident that it would be cost effective. Obviously assuming that the sensitivity is high enough so you don't miss any clots. But yeah, in the UK in particular, I think it's quite cost effective.
And obviously the work you've done so far does show how sensitive and efficient it is. So that's come out, I think you said 90% and 80%.
Yes, and you can read the paper and where those numbers come from. The caveat to that, of course, is that's the initial, say, preclinical data we had, which is good. I mean, it's what we expected. Compression ultrasound is very safe and it's very accurate. So we got consistent with results with what we thought we would get. But that's the reason we're doing this next study, is to, let's say, further validate those numbers prospectively. So you don't just get some ultrasound data and then just analyze it and then get results that way. That's quite good, and we did that and we got good results. But now we're saying in real life, when a nurse in the nurse's hand or non-specialist's hand scanning patients, how accurate are they relative to the gold standard, which is a sonographer carrying out the scan, and we just do a direct one-to-one comparison, and hopefully those numbers will also be in the 90s and above in terms of sensitivity.
And I know you have an exhibition area within the Let's Talk Clots platform, so a lot of these papers and further information is available on there, as well as how to contact you as well, isn't it?
Exactly.
Yeah. So looking into the future, if, and obviously the trials must take place, but in an ideal world, do you see these, with the trial evidence, coming into more opportunity of use in the next 3 to 5 years, or what sort of time frame?
Yeah, so that's a great question. What we hope to do is file some type of CE marking and FDA approval, and we had to be quite careful about what the study shows. So I think in terms of the sample size of the study, we can make claims on the diagnostic data quality produced by AutoDVT. So that unfortunately the study is too small to say just use the software and make it. Actually, we're planning another study after that. It's actually a pilot study to lead to a big one where we can just allow the software to make a diagnosis. Unfortunately, we're not at that stage yet, even after that study, to say the software makes it full diagnostic decision. It's just a very high bar to reach. What we can say, however, is that the quality of the images produced by AutoDVT are of diagnostic quality. And then you can discuss whether or not, and that's also under debate, whether or not a remote radiologist is then may be able to diagnose it. So a scan is performed by, say, a nurse, and as long as there's a confirmation diagnosis, it should be safe enough. And that's what we've been discussing, but we have to just be careful about the sample size and the powering and the statistics. I guess I just have to be very scientific around it and put all the caveats, but our ambition is at least at the very minimum, be able to scan a patient, say at 3 a.m. and then a radiologist, as long as they give a confirmation that you're fine. And that's still amazing. That's still much better than the current clinical pathway. And then for a much bigger study than the current one we're doing, we want to show non-inferiority. So even if there is not that final check, that it's still safe to just rule out DVT. That's what we want to show at the end. That's why we need people to help us with sites and studies and stuff, because that's what we're going for.
Phenomenal, really, the opportunity here, and without doubt you can see the benefit for most patients once the trial evidence is through. I'm not sure if anybody in the audience has any other questions. Please do type in if you do, but as we said just now, if you'd like to directly contact Fouad and to discuss his details are on the exhibition area under ThinkSono, and along with lots of the papers and information, or just email me and I can pass this on. But I think actually that's really informative.
Pretty much it. It's very simple, I suppose, straight to the point. I feel like I didn't take enough time, but
well, I think that's the whole story of this device, though, isn't it? It's meant to be very simple, but be very effective and improve the pathway, the patient outcome, and the burden and cost of the NHS. So
exactly, I couldn't have said it better myself. All right, thanks very much, Joe. As you said, if anyone wants more information, wants to join the studies, please do reach out to me. We're quite open to collaborate with others as well. So I really appreciate your time. Thank you very much, Joe.